in this lecture I will be discussing about decision making and perception and individual decision making, the role of perception and its influence on decision making process. So, the learning objectives here is perception, attribution theory and its influence on decision making and its process, types of problems. We will discuss about the structured and unstructured problems, type of decisions, programmed and non-programmed decisions, and decision making conditions like in a certainty, risk and uncertainty, creativity in decision making, limits in decision making biases and group decision making in organizations. Learning outcome here is to gain a thorough understanding of how managers apply the rational model of decision making in organizations under conditions of uncertainty, certainty and risk, to understand how individual differences and organizational constraints affect decision making. So, to start this lecture, I will tell you a story of the blind man and elephant. As all of us know that 6 blind men went to see an elephant and each one of them cited his opinion based on personal observation. The blind men, each of them had perceived the reality in a different way. Somebody said it is like somebody touched the ears of elephant and said it appears like a fan, and somebody said it appears to be like a wall and it is a rope and it is like a snake and it is a tree and it is a spear. So, though each of them was partly correct, but when you see what they said is not correct or what they were completely wrong in citing their opinion. So, it is very much similar how people construe the meaning of organization differently based on their own opinion, their observation, based on their experience. Here the elephant is very analogous to or similar to an organization. How I am going to connect this story of the blind man and elephant in organizations, how the story can be retold in organizations. As the elephant was perceived differently by different people, similarly an organization is also perceived differently by different people based on their own observation. So, organization has different aspects, different elements, like the elephant has different parts. So, here how we understand different problems of organization, I will give you some examples, like artificial intelligence is perceived differently by different people, like very similar to how blind men perceived an elephant. Few people perceive artificial intelligence to be a kind of, say, it's all about privacy, it is about saving money, and few more people perceive it as a driverless car, and some perceive it as it's all about cloud, some perceive it as it is all about machine learning, and few other perceive it as all about databases, algorithms, and few other people perceive it as it will lead to job loss. It is all about automation. So, an organization has different problems, or you can otherwise say there are several wicked problems in an organization. It requires complex judgment. There is no clear rule and no right or wrong solution. There could be alternative solutions, no objective measures of success, and sometimes, so there are several issues like some ethical issues, there are problems, unknown problems in the organization, and it is perceived differently or people have different opinion about those problems, and there has to be a rational decision for maintaining the performance or improving the efficiency of the organization. So, parable of the blind man and elephant is where it gives us an understanding of the systems thinking perspective of an organization. Like the 6 blind wise men think elephant is a set of components consisting of a mountain, rope, tree, fan, spear and the snake. Similarly, when you see organization, the different parts of organizations, different problems of organizations, they can be perceived differently. However, when you see the organization as a whole, it appears to be like a complete system. So, systems perspective, systems view say that it is a set of interrelated and interdependent elements which collectively which collectively functions, which helps each part to effectively function. So, the systems view say that there is an input, there is an output and there is a process in the organization, and each of them is dependent on each other. Each part of the organizations or each element is dependent on the other part, and they effectively function when they are they are interdependent and they are interconnected and interdependent with each other. So, parable of the blind man and elephant, the moral of the story is people tend to understand the reality, the tiny portion of the reality, and they extrapolate all manner of the dogmas from that, each claiming only his one is the correct version. The behavior of a system can be known just by knowing the elements of which the system is made. So, the mental model help managers make sense of complex problems and systems. So, in reality, organization is like an elephant with complex social system and wicked problems. There are several problems like the issues of diversity and inclusion, the problems of managing talent, the problems of customer satisfaction or customer related issues, the problems of the product related problems or supply chain related issues, quality improvement related issues or say cost minimization. So, the problems can be varied, but however, these problems have to be solved by taking collective decisions. So, in this I would like to state that first we will define what is perception, and then how perception, what are the factors that influence perception. Then I will discuss about the attribution theory, and then how the errors attribution theory can help in what are the elements of attribution theory, what are the errors and biases in attribution theory, what are the frequently used shortcuts in judging others and specific shortcut applications in organizations and perceptions, and then I will finally discuss about the perception and individual decision making. So, coming back to what is perception, we will discuss about the first definition of perception. Perception is a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions in order to give meaning to their environment. What we discussed, it is a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impressions. Each one has his or her own learning, their own value system, their own interpretation of events, and which they try to attribute, and through the learning, through their values, through their understanding that, and through their cognition, they try to attribute meaning to the objective reality, or they try to give meaning to their environment. So, which will people's behavior is based on their perception of what reality is and not the reality itself. The world as it is perceived is the world that is behaviorally important. So, here what are the factors that influence perception? Factors in the situation, factors in the perceivers and factors in the target. All these factors help in building perception. So, let us first start with what is the factor in the situation. Time can be one of the factors which can help in perception. So, what you see yesterday and what you see today, there is a difference. Similarly, so the time can change your perception. The perception that you build about a particular object today, and maybe you see after a month there will be a whole lot of change in your perception. Work setting, the workplace in which you are working will can also influence your perception. There is a comfort in the workplace, maybe your perception will be different. If you slightly get discomforted in the workplace, the setting, the location, so there would be a influence on your perception, or it will influence your sense of interpretation of objective reality. Similarly, the social setting, the peer group, affiliation, the interaction with the social group will also have an influence on the perception building. The factors associated with perceiver, one who perceives, the attitude, the motives, then interest and experience, expectation of individuals also influences the perception. Attitude, whether you have a favorable or unfavorable attitude towards an object will influence your decision, will influence your perception building. Motives, what is the motive of an individual, what is the objective behind the person's intention, and what is the interest of the individual, whether you have whether you are motivated or whether you have a liking towards a particular object. So, based on that you can also form your perception. Experience, based on the past experience, based on your experience with the similar product, based on experience with the person in the past. So, a person can also build a perception. Expectations, so these factors collectively help in forming perception. Factors in the target like novelty, motion, sound, size, background, proximity and similarity. These factors also influence in perception building. Then let us talk about the attribution theory, judging others, how we judge others. Attribution theory states that our perception and judgment about others is influenced by our assumption of other person's internal state. So, which means that when individuals observe behavior, they attempt to determine whether it is internally or externally caused. Internal causes are under the person's self control. External causes are not person forced to act in that way. Causation is judged through distinctiveness, shows different behavior in different situation. Consensus, response is the same as the others to the same situation. Consistency means response in the same way over time. So, what we discussed is perception basically is judgment. Our perception and judgment of others is influenced by our assumptions of other person's internal state of affairs. Internal causes are under the person's control and external causes are not under the person's control. Therefore, the person is forced to act in a particular way. So, what is attribution theory? Attribution theory says that when individuals observe behavior, they attempt to determine whether it is internally or externally caused. It can be sometimes internally caused and maybe externally caused. So, here what is distinctiveness? Shows individual shows different behavior in different situation, which is distinctiveness. Consensus means responses in the same way as others to the same situation. Consistency is defined as the individual responds in the same way over a period of time. So, how does attribution theory? Attribution theory helps in attribution theory, when individuals observe behavior, they attempt to determine whether it is internally or externally caused, which means an employee is late due to internal or external attributions, late night partying, then oversleeping, accident on the road, tied up traffic. And for consensus, other people using the same route, but on time, then the causation will be internal it all responds, if all responds in the same way, then we can say behavior shows consensus. Here I will explain these things in details. What is distinctiveness? As we have discussed that distinctiveness shows different behavior in different situations. That means, an individual exhibits different behavior in different situations. So, an employee is late. So, you can say that employee is late because of some internal factors. He is late because he missed the bus, he is late because he has woke up late, or external attribution. An employee is late because of some external factors. Some external factors, there was some kind of say road jam, or there was some road blockade. So, some kind of reasons which are not within his control. Late night partying, then oversleeping, some reasons you can attribute, accident on the road, so tied up traffic and so on. Consensus is defined as response is the same as others to the same situation. That means, an individual responds similarly as other people in when reacted in a similar situation. So, other people using the same route, but they are on time, then you can say all other people using the same route, but they come to a place or they come to office on time, then you can say the cause is internal. The person who came late is because he missed, it is because of his fault. If all people, if all responds in the same way, if everybody who is using that same route, they respond in the same way, they are late. So, then you can say that behavior shows consensus, the person was also late because there are some external factors attributed to it. Then moving on to the third point is consistency. Consistency means a person responds in the same way over time. Say if you see somebody coming to a particular place, or somebody who is coming to the office at a particular time, and every day you observe his behavior, he comes, reports to the office in the same time, then you say that the person shows or exhibits responds to a particular the person exhibits a behavior over time. So, this is called consistency. She is regularly late 2-3 times a week, then you can say that it is because of the internal factors or internal causes. If she has not been late for several months, external causes, maybe she has never been late, she has always been on time. So, you can say if somebody is late today, that means there is some external factor which has led to the persons coming to office late. So, what is the learning here? What we discussed so far, we were discussing that how perception is built. Perception is built by an individual, there are some factors associated, and the factors are like time, work setting, social setting, factors in the perceiver's domain, and factors in the target. So, we discussed that a person perceives a particular object, makes a perception or judges based on his or her understanding and interpretation, based on his or her experience. And so, we can put this discussion in a diagrammatic manner. So, observation leads to interpretation, and interpretation to attribution of cause. Individual exhibits a behavior, individual's observation based on distinctiveness, that means interpretation, how he interprets, distinctiveness, consensus and consistency. So, distinctiveness is what we have discussed, is shows different behavior in different situation, and consensus is response in the same response is the same as others to the same situation, and consistency responds in the same way over time. So, these three are the ways in which a person can interpret things, and he can attribute either external factors or internal factors in each situation. So, attribution to a cause. What is now? So, this helps in building perception, elements of the attribution theory, and after that we will discuss about what are errors and biases in attributions. But generally we come across some errors and biases errors or biases in attribution, they distort the perception of an individual. Fundamental attribution error. What is fundamental attribution error? The tendency to underestimate the influence of external factors and overestimate the influence of internal factors. As we discussed, that attribution of causes, sometimes for a genuine cause we may erroneously take decisions and we may attribute external factors when internal factors were actual cause of the delay of a person, or internal factors could be one of the reasons, but we erroneously blame or shift the or attribute external factors to be one of the reasons. So, here we are not taking decisions rightly, but based on our perception. So, fundamental attribution error says it is a tendency to underestimate the influence of external factors and overestimate or escalate the influence of internal factors when making judgments about the behavior of others. We blame people first and not the situation. Generally, it is a tendency in organizations. We commonly come across situations when there is a mistake. A manager often blames his subordinate rather than the situation. So, that means the person is taking decisions based on the interpretation he or she has about the person, about the subordinate, like distinctiveness, consensus and consistency. He may have attributed the internal factors because the attribution because of the attribution error, fundamental attribution error. And self-serving bias, the tendency for individuals to attribute their own success to internal factors while putting the blame for failures on the external factors. So, it is our success, but their failure. Generally, people also have, the managers generally try to claim success, they shift the blame on others and success is attributed as their own, or they claim the success as their own and shift the failure to others. So, frequently use shortcuts in judging others. Selective perception, people selectively interpret what they see on the basis of their interest, background, experience and attitude. So, this is called selective perception, which we will be they selectively interpret what they see on the basis of their interest, their background, their experience and attitude. So, I will explain few points here. When we see the advertisements, generally on television, when we see the advertisements, what commonly or what people commonly observe is what is of interest to them. There is an advertisement of Coca-Cola, or there is an advertisement of say of Nirma, which is generally which people record in their memory, which people are easily able to recall. So, why this happens? It is because of selective perception. We generally remember things which we have interest in. We have, if there is a song or if there is a jingle which we like, so we would try to recall it. Selective perception. Background experience, if while in the interview generally there is a role of selective perception which leads to some shortcuts in judging others. Managers often select people who have a similar background as theirs, who have an experience similar to theirs. So, there is some kind of similarity attraction theory which helps in making, or which are used as shortcuts in judgment of others. Similarly, having experience, the past experience with the person. Customers having past experience with a product would like to select the product. Generally, what we see, people tend to buy the product which they had a very good experience. They try to pick up a product, or they try to often buy those brands which they had a very good experience in the past. So, these are the shortcuts in which are used in judging or in judgments. Halo effect, drawing a general impression about an individual on the basis of a single characteristics. On the basis of one characteristics, we tend to find that some individuals make decisions. Contrast effects, evaluation of a person's characteristics that are affected by comparison with other persons recently encountered, other people recently encountered who rank higher or lower in on same characteristics. So, contrast effect means evaluation of a person's characteristics that are affected by comparison with other people who recently encountered. In the selection process, we generally try to compare one person with the other person, try to see and take judgment on the basis of the comparison between two individuals. So, this is also one of the shortcuts in judgment of others. Stereotype, judging someone on the basis of one's perception of the group to which the person belongs. We also come across some kind of stereotypes which are also shortcuts in judgment of others. If a person belongs to a particular group, so he is considered to be similar, or he is considered to be exhibiting the similar characteristics, similar behavior. So, stereotyping means judging someone on the basis of one's perception of the group to which the person belongs. A prevalent and often useful, if not always accurate generalization. So, this is stereotyping we can find mostly in organizations, say gender stereotyping, racial stereotyping, where a person from a group, a particular racial group or a gender is perceived to exhibit behavior similarly. So, these shortcuts influence in forming judgment about others. The next point is profiling, a form of stereotype which members of a group are singled out of intense scrutiny based on some kind of a single of often racial trait. So, this is also profiling a person based on his belongingness to a particular group. So, what we discussed, the commonly used shortcuts in judging others: selective perception, halo effect, contrast effect, stereotyping and profiling. Selective perception is basically people selectively interpret what they see on the basis of their interest, what is most interesting to them. Like I said, if I like a particular advertisement, if I like a particular jingle, so my interest would be I will select that particular, I will record that in my memory. Background is when people have a similarity of background, they tend to select the person when he appears for an interview based on our past experience with the product, based on our past experience with a person. We remember, and next time we take judgment based on our experience, based on how much favorable or unfavorable our attitude is towards a particular object or towards a subject. Halo effect is drawing an impression about an individual on the basis of one particular characteristics, and contrast effect is while evaluating a person, we tend to compare with the other people who recently encountered or whom we have come across in a particular situation. So, all these are biases, and here what we have discussed, I will just like to conclude the session with what we discussed so far. We have discussed about perception, we have discussed about the various factors of attribution theory, the factors that influence perception building of an individual, and then we also discussed about the elements of attribution theory. Specifically, we discussed about the distinctiveness, consensus and consistency, and then how perception helps in decision making. Perception and individual, the specific shortcut applications, what shortcuts are used. In the next section, in the next lecture, we will discuss about the specific shortcut applications in organizations and how they influence in decision making. Thank you.